In a city where crime lurked around every corner, there was a name that struck fear into the hearts of wrongdoers. Max. Max wasn't a person. He was a police dog, a German shepherd with sleek black and tan fur, sharp eyes, and an intimidating bark that could silence even the rowdiest crowd. People whispered about him in hushed tones, calling him dangerous. Criminals dreaded crossing his path because they knew once Max locked onto them, escape was nearly impossible. But what most people didn't realize was that behind those piercing eyes lay a story far more complex than anyone imagined. Max's reputation as dangerous wasn't just based on rumors. It was earned through years of service. He had been part of countless arrests, tracking down suspects who thought they could outrun the law. His speed, strength, and unwavering focus made him one of the best in the K-9 unit. Officers respected him deeply, often saying Max was worth 10 men when it came to catching criminals. Civilians, however, weren't so sure. Some crossed the street to avoid walking past him during patrols. Children would stare wide-eyed from their parents' arms, unsure whether to be fascinated or frightened by the imposing canine. But if you looked closer, you'd notice something else about Max, something softer, almost hidden beneath his tough exterior. It was the way he stood beside Officer Sarah Collins, his partner. Sarah was a seasoned officer with a no-nonsense attitude. But around Max, she softened. She spoke to him gently, her voice calm and reassuring. When off duty, she let him rest his head on her lap, stroking his ears while talking quietly to him. To Sarah, Max wasn't just a tool for the job. He was family. And though few outsiders saw this side of him, it was clear that Max trusted Sarah completely. What many didn't know was how Max ended up in the K-9 unit in the first place. Before becoming a police dog, Max had lived a very different life. As a puppy, he'd been abandoned by his original owners, left tied to a fence in the cold rain. When animal control found him, he was malnourished and terrified, cowering at the slightest touch. The local shelter took him in, hoping someone would adopt him, but months went by without interest. That's when fate intervened. Sarah, then a rookie officer, visited the shelter looking for a dog to train for the K-9 unit. Something about Max caught her eye, not his size or strength, but the faint glimmer of hope still flickering in his sad eyes. Training Max wasn't easy. Years of neglect had left emotional scars, making him skittish and unpredictable. At first, he struggled to follow commands, snapping at handlers out of fear rather than aggression. Many doubted he'd ever make it as a police dog, but Sarah refused to give up on him. Day after day, she worked patiently, teaching him not only skills but also trust. Slowly, Max began to change. His confidence grew, and so did his bond with Sarah. Over time, the timid pup transformed into a fearless protector, ready to face whatever challenges came his way. Despite all this, Max's past lingered like a shadow. The label of being dangerous stuck to him, even though it wasn't entirely fair. Yes, he was trained to chase down criminals and protect his handler at all costs. But that didn't mean he lacked kindness or compassion. Those qualities were simply buried under layers of survival instincts and hard work. Only Sarah truly understood this duality in Max, knowing that deep down, he was more than the fearsome reputation others assigned to him. Little did anyone know, Max's defining moment was yet to come, a moment that would force everyone to see him not as a monster, but as a hero. Until then, he remained a misunderstood figure, feared by some, admired by others, and loved fiercely by one woman who believed in him when no one else did. Max's journey to becoming the formidable police dog, everyone knew, wasn't a straightforward one. In fact, his early life was filled with pain and hardship, experiences that shaped him into the loyal, determined animal he became. Before he wore the badge or stood proudly beside Officer Sarah Collins, Max was just a scared puppy abandoned by those who were supposed to care for him. It all started when Max was barely a few months old. His first owners had kept him in a cramped backyard, tied to a chain so short it barely allowed him to move. They fed him scraps, if they remembered, and treated him more like an object than a living being. Neighbors often heard him whimpering late at night, but no one intervened. Then one cold, rainy evening, they simply left him behind. Tied to a fence post near an empty lot, Max sat shivering, his fur soaked and matted, his eyes wide with confusion. He didn't understand why the people who once fed him, even if sparingly, had walked away without looking back. Days passed, and Max grew weaker. Hunger gnawed at his stomach, and fear clouded his mind every time cars drove by or people approached. The world felt enormous and hostile to such a small creature. Just when it seemed like hope was slipping away, a kind-hearted animal control officer found him during a routine patrol. She saw how thin he was, how his ribs showed through his damp fur, and how his tail tucked tightly between his legs as she approached. Her heart broke for the little pup. Carefully, she untied the chain and wrapped him in a blanket before taking him to a nearby shelter. At the shelter, Max faced new challenges. He was terrified of human touch, flinching whenever someone tried to pet him or examine him. Loud noises sent him cowering into corners, and other dogs intimidated him. Volunteers worked hard to gain his trust, offering food and gentle words, but progress was slow. Many doubted whether Max would ever recover enough to be adopted. Despite their efforts, months went by without anyone showing interest in him. Most visitors wanted playful puppies or calm older dogs, not a traumatized young German shepherd who might never fully heal. Then came the day that changed everything. Sarah Collins, then a rookie officer eager to join the canine unit, visited the shelter hoping to find a dog she could train. She wandered past rows of kennels, glancing at wagging tails and hopeful faces. But something about Max caught her attention. Unlike the other dogs barking excitedly, Max sat quietly in the corner of his pen, watching her with wary eyes. There was a sadness in his gaze, but also a flicker of resilience, a tiny spark that told Sarah he hadn't given up yet. Curious, Sarah asked the staff about him. They warned her that Max was difficult, unpredictable, and possibly too damaged to train. But Sarah wasn't deterred. She knelt down outside his kennel, speaking softly and extending her hand. At first, Max stayed frozen, unsure of what to do. But after a few moments, he inched closer, sniffing cautiously. When he finally touched her fingers with his nose, Sarah felt a connection, an unspoken promise that together they could overcome anything. Training Max was far from easy. His past made him skittish and defensive. During early sessions, he'd snap at handlers out of fear, not malice, earning him a reputation as unstable. Some suggested giving up on him altogether, but Sarah refused. She spent hours each day working with him, teaching him basic commands while slowly building his confidence. She introduced him to new environments, sounds, and people, always rewarding him with treats and praise when he succeeded. Over time, Max began to change. The fearful pup transformed into a focused, disciplined dog, eager to please the woman who had shown him kindness. Through it all, Sarah never lost sight of the real Max, the one hidden beneath layers of hurt and mistrust. She knew he wasn't inherently dangerous. He was simply a survivor, shaped by circumstances beyond his control. With patience and love, she helped him rediscover his potential. By the time Max graduated from training and joined the canine unit, he was unrecognizable from the broken puppy left tied to a fence years earlier. Yet, even as he earned accolades for his skills, whispers of his troubled past followed him, fueling the perception that he was a dangerous dog. What no one realized was that Max carried not just scars, but also lessons from his painful history. Lessons about perseverance, loyalty, and the power of second chances. These qualities would soon prove invaluable, not just to Sarah, but to an entire community unaware of the hero lurking beneath Max's tough exterior. The call came in just as the sun was setting, casting long shadows over the city streets. Dispatch's voice crackled through the police radio. All units, we have a report of an armed suspect at Joe's convenience store on 5th and Maple. Hostage situation confirmed. Proceed with caution. Officer Sarah Collins grabbed her gear, her heart pounding as she glanced at Max sitting alertly beside her in the squad car. His ears were already perked up, sensing the urgency in the air. This wasn't their first high-stakes situation, but something about this one felt different. As they sped toward the scene, red and blue lights flashing against the darkening sky, Sarah replayed the details in her mind. A man had entered the convenience store, demanding cash from the register. When the clerk refused, the situation escalated quickly. Now the suspect was holding a young girl hostage, a child who had been buying candy after school when chaos erupted. Witnesses reported hearing shouting and seeing the glint of a weapon. Time was running out, and everyone knew it. When Sarah and Max arrived, the area was already cordoned off with yellow tape. Officers stood tense, weapons drawn, while paramedics waited anxiously nearby. Through the store's large front windows, they could see the silhouette of the suspect pacing back and forth, clutching the terrified girl close to him. Her small frame trembled as she clutched a stuffed animal, tears streaming down her face. Every so often, the man would yell demands, his voice raw with desperation. Negotiators tried talking him down, but he only grew more agitated, waving the gun wildly. Sarah stepped out of the car, her eyes scanning the scene. She knelt beside Max, placing a reassuring hand on his shoulder. "All right, buddy," she whispered, her voice steady despite the storm of emotions inside her. "We got this. Stay sharp." Max responded with a low growl, his body coiled like a spring, ready to act at her command. Though trained for moments like these, Sarah couldn't help but feel a pang of worry. The stakes had never felt higher. The negotiators' attempts continued, but the suspect wasn't budging. He shouted that he wanted a getaway car and safe passage, or else. The "or else" hung heavy in the air, leaving everyone on edge. Inside the store, the girl whimpered, her cries barely audible through the glass. Parents watching from behind the barricade sobbed quietly, praying for their children's safety. Even seasoned officers shifted uncomfortably, knowing how easily things could go wrong. Finally, the decision was made. If the situation worsened, Max would be sent in. As part of the K-9 unit, his role was clear: to neutralize threats swiftly and decisively. But Sarah knew better than anyone that Max wasn't just a machine. He was a thinking, feeling being capable of restraint. Still, the weight of responsibility pressed heavily on her shoulders. Sending Max into harm's way was always a risk, no matter how skilled he was. Minutes ticked by like hours. Suddenly, the tension reached a breaking point. The suspect lunged toward the door, dragging the girl with him. His movements were erratic, fueled by panic and adrenaline. Shouts erupted from the officers outside as they scrambled to respond. It happened so fast, too fast for anyone to react. The man raised the gun, pointing it not at the police but at the crowd beyond the barricade. Without hesitation, Sarah gave the signal. Max sprang into action, moving faster than anyone thought possible. His powerful legs propelled him forward, closing the distance between him and the suspect in seconds. There was no snarling, no unnecessary aggression, just pure precision honed through years of training. In one fluid motion, Max tackled the man, knocking the gun from his hand and pinning him to the ground before he could cause further harm. The entire scene seemed to freeze, the only sound being the suspect's muffled protests beneath Max's firm grip. For a moment, everyone held their breath. Then, realizing the immediate danger had passed, officers rushed in to secure the suspect. Paramedics hurried to check on the shaken girl, who collapsed into their arms, sobbing uncontrollably. And standing nearby, Sarah exhaled deeply, her hand resting gently on Max's back. He looked up at her, his tail wagging slightly, as if to say, "We did it." What followed was a wave of relief and awe. No one had doubted Max's abilities, but witnessing his calm professionalism in such a volatile situation left even the most hardened officers speechless. For the first time, some began to wonder, was Max truly as dangerous as people claimed? Or was there something else beneath that tough exterior? something extraordinary waiting to be seen. The moment Max sprang into action, time seemed to slow down for everyone watching. The suspect had lunged toward the door with the young girl in tow, his movements frantic and unpredictable. Panic rippled through the crowd as officers shouted warnings, their voices blending into a chaotic symphony of tension. It was clear that the situation was spiraling out of control, and fast. But amidst the chaos, one figure moved with precision and purpose. Max. With a burst of speed that took everyone by surprise, Max closed the distance between himself and the suspect in seconds. His powerful legs propelled him forward like a bullet, his focus unwavering. There was no hesitation, no second-guessing, just pure instinct honed through years of training. As he reached the suspect, Max didn't attack wildly or lash out in anger. Instead, he executed a perfectly timed maneuver, grabbing the man's arm firmly but without unnecessary force. The gun clattered to the ground, skittering away across the pavement. The suspect stumbled backward, caught off guard by the sudden intervention. Before he could recover, Max pinned him down, standing over him with an authority that left no room for resistance. The man struggled briefly, his shouts fading into muffled protests beneath Max's weight. Though Max's teeth were bared, ready to act if needed, he held back just enough to avoid causing serious harm. It was a masterclass in restraint, a delicate balance between power and control. For a few heart-stopping seconds, the world seemed to hold its breath. Then, realizing the immediate threat had been neutralized, officers rushed in to secure the scene. Handcuffs clicked into place around the suspect's wrists as paramedics hurried to check on the little girl. She collapsed into their arms, her tiny body shaking with sobs, clutching her stuffed animal tightly. Her cries echoed through the air, breaking the tense silence that had settled over the crowd. But what happened next was something no one expected, and it changed everything. As the officers led the suspect away, Sarah approached the frightened child cautiously. Kneeling beside her, she spoke softly, trying to calm her down. "It's okay now," she said, her voice gentle. "You're safe." But the girl wasn't listening. Her wide, tear-filled eyes were fixed on Max, who stood nearby, his chest heaving from the exertion of the chase. For a moment, fear flickered across her face. After all, this was the same dangerous dog people whispered about, the one criminals feared. Sensing her unease, Sarah gave Max a subtle nod. Slowly, almost hesitantly, Max stepped forward. His movements were deliberate, his head lowered slightly as if to appear less intimidating. When he reached the girl, he stopped, tilting his head to look at her. There was no growl, no sign of aggression, just quiet curiosity. The girl froze, staring at him through watery eyes. Then, as if guided by some invisible force, she reached out a trembling hand and touched his nose. At first, Max didn't move. He simply stood there, letting her feel the warmth of his fur beneath her fingers. Encouraged by his stillness, the girl leaned closer, wrapping her arms around his neck in a tight hug. Her sobs softened, replaced by shaky breaths, as she buried her face against him. Max responded gently, lowering his body so she could cling to him more easily. His tail wagged slowly, a silent reassurance that she was safe now. The sight brought tears to the eyes of everyone watching. Hardened officers who had seen countless harrowing moments in their careers found themselves blinking back emotion. Parents in the crowd hugged their children tighter, whispering words of gratitude. Even those who had once feared Max couldn't help but marvel at the tenderness he displayed in that moment. Far from being the menacing figure they imagined, Max revealed himself to be exactly what he was trained to be: a protector. Sarah watched the exchange with a mixture of pride and relief. She had always known Max was capable of such compassion, but seeing it unfold in front of so many people filled her with a deep sense of validation. This wasn't just another successful mission. It was proof that Max was more than the label others had given him. Beneath his tough exterior beat the heart of a true hero, driven not by aggression, but by an innate desire to help those in need. As the paramedics escorted the girl to an ambulance for further evaluation, she kept glancing back at Max, her expression shifting from fear to gratitude. For the first time since the ordeal began, a small smile tugged at the corners of her lips. And Max. He sat quietly beside Sarah, his tongue lolling out in a contented pant, as if to say, "Job well done." In that single transformative moment, perceptions shifted. What had once been fear turned into admiration and respect. People began to see Max not as a dangerous animal, but as a guardian angel in disguise. Little did they know, this was on. The moment the little girl hugged Max, something extraordinary happened, not just for her, but for everyone who witnessed it. The crowd that had gathered behind the police barricades erupted into applause, their cheers breaking through the lingering tension like sunlight piercing a storm cloud. Parents clapped with tears streaming down their faces, while children peeked out from behind their mothers' legs, pointing at Max in awe. Even seasoned officers, men and women accustomed to keeping their emotions in check, wiped away tears as they watched the unlikely bond form between the traumatized child and the dangerous dog. For Sarah, standing nearby, the scene was overwhelming. She had always believed in Max's capacity for kindness, but seeing him comfort the girl so instinctively reminded her why she had fought so hard to train him. It wasn't just about catching criminals or protecting the public. It was about creating moments like this, where fear could be replaced with trust and despair with hope. As she knelt beside Max, resting a hand on his broad back, she felt an immense swell of pride. This was more than a rescue mission. It was redemption for Max, for the girl, and perhaps even for those who had doubted him. Word of what happened spread quickly. Within hours, videos of the incident began circulating online. One clip, taken by a bystander, captured the exact moment the girl hugged Max. In the video, you could see her tiny arms wrapping around his neck, her sobs softening as she clung to him. Max, for his part, sat perfectly still, his tail wagging gently as if to reassure her. The footage went viral almost instantly, racking up thousands of views and comments. People from all over the country weighed in, praising Max for his bravery and compassion. Some shared stories of their own encounters with police dogs, while others admitted they had once feared them, but now saw them in a new light. Local news stations picked up the story, interviewing witnesses and officers at the scene. One elderly woman, who lived near the convenience store, told reporters, "I've heard people call that dog dangerous before, but when I saw him comforting that poor girl, I realized he's anything but. He's a hero." Another witness, a young father holding his son's hand, added, "It made me think about how we judge things based on what we hear, not what we see. That dog saved that girl's life, and he did it with love." As the days passed, Max became a local celebrity. Strangers approached Sarah during patrols, asking if they could meet him or take pictures with him. Children brought handmade cards to the police station, decorating them with drawings of Max wearing a badge and cape. "Thank you for saving our friend," one card read in colorful crayon. Others simply said, "We love Max." The outpouring of affection was overwhelming, not just for Max, but for the entire K9 unit. For the first time, people began to understand the vital role these dogs played in keeping their community safe. But the impact didn't stop there. Schools invited Sarah and Max to visit classrooms, hoping to teach students about empathy and overcoming prejudice. During one such visit, a shy boy raised his hand and asked, "Is Max really dangerous?" Sarah smiled and crouched down to the boy's level, bringing Max closer. "Do you want to pet him?" she asked softly. The boy hesitated, glancing nervously at Max's large frame. But when Max lowered his head and nudged the boy's hand gently, the fear melted away. The boy giggled, scratching behind Max's ears as his classmates cheered. By the end of the session, every child in the room wanted to hug Max. Even city officials took notice. A council member proposed honoring Max with a special commendation, recognizing his service and the positive change he inspired in the community. At the ceremony, held in front of the police station, hundreds of people gathered to celebrate the heroic dog. Speeches were given, flowers were placed at Max's feet, and a banner declaring him hero of the city was unveiled. As cameras flashed and applause filled the air, Max sat proudly beside Sarah, his tongue lolling out in a happy grin. What struck everyone most, however, was the shift in perception. Before that fateful day at the convenience store, many had dismissed Max as nothing more than a tool, a weapon used to catch bad guys. But now, they saw him for what he truly was, a living, breathing being capable of courage, restraint, and unconditional love. The label of dangerous no longer carried the same weight. Instead, it became a testament to his strength, not just physical, but emotional. Max had proven that true danger lies not in power, but in misunderstanding, and in doing so, he had changed hearts forever. Though the spotlight eventually dimmed, the memory of that day lingered. For Max, life returned to normal, or as normal as it could be for a dog whose name was now synonymous with heroism. But for the people who, in the months that followed the convenience store incident, Max's story became a catalyst for change, not just in how people viewed police dogs, but in how they thought about the bond between humans and animals. The viral videos, heartfelt testimonials, and countless news stories sparked conversations across the city. People began to see working dogs like Max not as tools or machines, but as sentient beings with feelings, instincts, and an innate desire to serve. This newfound understanding led to tangible changes in how canine units were supported and appreciated. One of the most significant shifts came from within the community itself. Inspired by Max's heroism, local businesses started donating supplies to the canine unit. Everything from high-quality dog food to custom-fitted vests designed to protect the dogs during dangerous missions. A popular pet store even launched a fundraising campaign called Paws for Heroes, encouraging customers to contribute money toward medical care and retirement funds for retired police dogs. For years, these needs had gone largely unnoticed, but now, thanks to Max, people were eager to give back. Sarah took full advantage of the momentum, using her platform to advocate for better treatment of working dogs. She gave interviews, attended town hall meetings, and spoke passionately about the sacrifices these animals made every day. Max isn't just my partner, he's family, she told the packed auditorium during one such event. These dogs dedicate their lives to keeping us safe, often putting themselves in harm's way without hesitation. They deserve our respect, our gratitude, and proper care when their service ends. Her words resonated deeply, prompting many to rethink their assumptions about police dogs. The movement gained so much traction that city officials proposed legislation aimed at improving conditions for working dogs. One bill focused on ensuring that retired canine officers received lifelong health care benefits, a measure previously overlooked due to budget constraints. Another initiative sought to create a sanctuary where retired police dogs could live out their golden years comfortably, surrounded by love and care. These policies might never have been considered if not for Max's story, which reminded everyone of the loyalty and sacrifice these animals embodied. But perhaps the most touching development was the personal connection people felt toward Max. Children continued to send letters and drawings to the police station, often addressed directly to him. "Dear Max," one note read, "thank you for being brave and saving that little girl. You are my favorite superhero." Another letter included a photo of a boy hugging his own dog, captioned, "This is my buddy, Rocky. He says hi to you." Sarah pinned these heartfelt messages on a bulletin board in the break room, where officers frequently stopped to smile at the growing collection. Max also became a symbol of hope for those who had experienced trauma. The young girl he had saved visited the station several times, bringing him treats and toys as tokens of gratitude. At first, she clung tightly to her mother's hand, still shaken by the ordeal. But with each visit, her confidence grew. By the third meeting, she was laughing and playing fetch with Max in the station's courtyard, her laughter echoing through the air like music. Seeing her transformation reinforced what Sarah already knew. Max had a unique ability to heal wounds that ran deeper than anyone realized. Even criminals seemed to view Max differently after the incident. Word of his actions spread among the fenders, many of whom admitted they no longer saw him, or any police dog, as merely a threat. That dog could have torn me apart. But he didn't. One suspect confessed during questioning after a routine arrest. He let me live. That means something. Such comments highlighted how Max's restraint and professionalism left a lasting impression, even on those who once feared him. As time went on, Max's legend only grew. Murals depicting him sprang up around the city, painted by local artists inspired by his courage. One mural showed him mid-stride, his ears perked and eyes focused, with the words "Guardian Angel" written boldly beneath. Another featured him sitting calmly beside Sarah, their silhouettes framed by a sunset. Each piece served as a reminder of the day Max proved that true strength lies not in aggression, but in compassion. Though Max remained humble, content to chase balls and nap under Sarah's desk, he carried himself with quiet dignity, as if aware of the impact he'd made. To those who knew him best, it was clear that Max wasn't just a police dog. He was a teacher, a healer, and a bridge between fear and understanding. And while his days of chasing suspects weren't over yet, his legacy was already secure. Through his actions, Max had shown the world that even the toughest exterior could hide the softest heart. And that sometimes, the most stand. The years rolled by, and though Max remained a pillar of strength for the K-9 unit, time eventually began to catch up with him. His once jet-black fur turned gray around his muzzle, and his powerful strides slowed to a steady trot. The long hours of training, patrols, and high-stakes missions had taken their toll, but Max never complained. Still, Sarah noticed the subtle signs. The way he lingered a little longer in the sun after morning exercises, or how he'd rest his head on her lap more often during downtime. It was clear that Max's body was telling him something. His days as an active police dog were coming to an end. When the decision was finally made to retire Max, it wasn't just Sarah who felt the weight of it. The entire department mourned the transition. Officers lined the hallway of the station on his last day, saluting him as he walked past with Sarah. Some clapped softly, others simply stood in silence, their eyes glistening. Max seemed to sense the significance of the moment, his tail wagging slowly as he glanced at each face. Though he didn't wear a badge like the humans did, everyone knew he had earned his place among them, not through words, but through action. Retirement suited Max well. No longer burdened by the demands of duty, he settled into a peaceful life with Sarah, who adopted him fully. She bought him a plush dog bed, though he preferred curling up beside her on the couch. Their daily routine became simpler. Leisurely walks through the park, lazy afternoons in the backyard, and endless games of fetch. Neighbors grew accustomed to seeing the two of them together, Max trotting happily at Sarah's side, his golden years shining brightly despite his slower pace. But Max's influence didn't fade with his retirement. In fact, his story continued to inspire people far beyond the city limits. Schools invited Sarah to speak about Max's journey, hoping to teach children valuable lessons about resilience, compassion, and overcoming adversity. During these visits, Max accompanied her, drawing gasps of excitement from classrooms whenever he entered. The kids adored him, clamoring to pet his soft fur and listen to tales of his heroic exploits. Sarah always emphasized one key point: Max isn't special because he's brave or strong. He's special because he showed us all that even someone labeled dangerous can have a heart full of love. Community events also kept Max busy in his retirement. He attended fundraisers, parades, and charity functions, where crowds greeted him with cheers and applause. At one event, a young boy with autism approached Max cautiously, encouraged by his parents. The child had always been afraid of dogs, but something about Max put him at ease. Slowly, tentatively, the boy reached out to touch Max's nose. When Max responded with a gentle lick, the boy smiled, a rare sight for his family. Moments like this reminded everyone why Max was so beloved. He had a gift for connecting with people, no matter their age or background. As Max aged further, Sarah ensured he lived every moment to the fullest. She documented his golden years with photos and videos, sharing them online to keep his fans updated. One popular post showed Max lounging in a patch of sunlight, his ears flopped sideways as he chewed on a squeaky toy. Another captured him napping under a tree during a picnic, surrounded by children tossing frisbees nearby. These glimpses into his quiet, joyful life brought smiles to thousands of faces, proving that heroes don't need to chase criminals to make an impact. Eventually, however, old age caught up with Max. On a crisp autumn morning, surrounded by Sarah and those who loved him most, Max passed away peacefully in his sleep. The news hit the community hard. Social media flooded with tributes, and flowers piled up outside the police station. People shared memories of how Max had touched their lives, whether through a chance encounter or a school visit. For many, losing Max felt like saying goodbye to a cherished friend. To honor his memory, the city commissioned a statue of Max in front of the police station. Sculpted with meticulous detail, it depicted him mid-stride, his ears perked and tail held high, exuding the same determination and grace he had shown throughout his life. Beneath the statue, a plaque read, "Not all heroes wear badges." Every day, passers-by stopped to admire it, leaving notes, flowers, and sometimes even dog treats at its base. Though Max was gone, his legacy endured. He had changed perceptions, inspired kindness, and reminded everyone that true heroism comes not from strength alone, but from the ability to protect, comfort, and heal. And while his paw prints may have faded from the streets, they remain forever etched in the hearts of those who had known him, even if only for a moment. Max's death left a void in the community that no one could quite fill. The statue erected in his honor became more than just a tribute. It became a gathering place, a symbol of hope and unity for everyone who had been touched by his story. On weekends, families would visit the statue, bringing their children to teach them about the extraordinary dog who had once walked among them. Some left handwritten notes tucked into the base, sharing how Max had changed their perspective on police dogs, or even on life itself. Others brought flowers or small tokens, creating an ever-growing memorial that reflected the deep love people still felt for him. For Sarah, losing Max was like losing a piece of her soul. He had been her partner, her confidant, and her closest friend through some of the toughest moments of her career. Yet, even in grief, she found comfort knowing that Max's legacy lived on, not just in the statue or the stories, but in the countless lives he had transformed. She often visited the statue herself, sitting quietly as she remembered their adventures together. Sometimes she'd bring his favorite squeaky toy, placing it gently at the foot of the monument before walking away with tears in her eyes. But Max's influence didn't stop there. Inspired by his story, the city launched new initiatives aimed at supporting working dogs and their handlers. A Max Fund was established to provide financial assistance for medical care, training equipment, and retirement homes for retired canine officers. Local schools added lessons about Max to their curriculum, teaching students about empathy, resilience, and the importance of looking beyond labels. One teacher shared how a shy student, inspired by Max's courage, stood up to bullies in class, a testament to the ripple effect of his heroism. Even criminals seemed to carry a lingering respect for Max long after his passing. Officers reported that suspects arrested during high-risk situations often mentioned him, recalling how his restraint and professionalism had earned their admiration. "That dog could have hurt me, but he didn't," one man said during a routine booking. "He taught me something about second chances." Such comments highlighted how Max's actions transcended fear, leaving behind a lesson in humanity that resonated far beyond his lifetime. As years passed, Max's legend grew instead of fading. Documentaries were made about his life, capturing interviews with Sarah, fellow officers, and members of the community who had known him. One film featured footage of Max playing fetch in his golden years, interspersed with clips of his daring rescues and tender moments with the little girl he saved. The documentary ended with a powerful message. True heroes aren't defined by what they take, but by what they give. And Max gave everything. Every year on the anniversary of Max's passing, the city held a special ceremony at the statue. People gathered to share memories, release balloons, and celebrate the life of the dog who had become a beacon of hope. At one such event, the now-grown girl Max had saved stepped forward to speak. Her voice trembled as she recounted the day her life changed forever. "I was so scared that day," she said, clutching a photo of herself hugging Max. "But when I saw him, I knew I was safe. He wasn't just a dog. He was my guardian angel." As she placed the photo at the base of the statue, the crowd erupted into applause, many wiping away tears. Though Max's physical presence was gone, his spirit remained alive in every corner of the city. New recruits in the K-9 unit looked up to him as the gold standard for bravery and compassion. Parents named their puppies after him, ensuring his name carried on for generations. And whenever someone doubted the capabilities or the heart of a police dog, all it took was one mention of Max to remind them of what these remarkable animals were truly capable of. In the end, Max proved that heroism isn't measured by strength or speed, but by the ability to inspire change. He started as a frightened puppy, abandoned and labeled dangerous, yet he rose above it all to become a symbol of courage, loyalty, and unconditional love. His journey showed the world that even those dismissed as threats can harbor the deepest wells of kindness, and that sometimes the most dangerous thing we face is our own misunderstanding. And so, though Max was no longer there to chase suspects or comfort frightened children, his paw prints remained indelibly marked on the hearts of everyone who had crossed his path. For in saving one little girl, he had saved an entire community, not just from harm, but from prejudice, fear, and doubt. Max may have been called dangerous, but in truth, he was anything but. He was, and always would be, a hero.